Yes, this was electrified, so it did have heating underneath of it. The kinds of train cars that preceded it, though, the ones pulled by locomotives, would not have had heating. So keep that. So, all right. So, welcome aboard the oldest train car here at the New York Transit Museum. This is a 1904 BRT Brooklyn Union elevated train car. There's a lot of information that just came out of my mouth, so I'll break it down. 1904 means that this train car, you guys can have a seat if you want. 1904 means that this train car is 110 years old. The oldest train car here in our museum, the oldest passenger train car. BRT stands for Brooklyn Rapid Transit. They were a privately owned public transportation company that did elevated and street level transportation in Brooklyn and in Queens, really ever since the late 1860s. They're very important to the story of the subway though, because in 1913, this company becomes the second privately owned company to operate subways in New York City. A lot of us are more familiar with them under the name BMT, Brooklyn Manhattan Transit, which is the name they come back as after they go bankrupt in the late 19-teens. But I'm getting ahead of myself because this is a elevated train car, not a subway train car, and this is 1904. So really the things that make a 1904 110-year-old elevated train car so different from maybe the subways that you took to get here today are the materials. So if everyone wants to make a fist, find something dark green, give it a couple of knocks. What is the entire train made out of? Wood. Wood. Are trains today made out of wood? No. No, absolutely not. In fact, ever since 1918, it has been completely illegal to have people inside of a wooden-bodied train car while it's underground. Even the fact that we right now are people inside of a wooden-bodied train car underground is something that the city of New York has an issue with. We have to have very special permission just to be doing what we're doing right now here at the Transit Museum. That's how seriously we take this law. Yeah? Why? Why? Good question. In the early 19-teens, you have a lot of labor disputes. There are a couple of really important jobs on a subway train. You have the operator. The operator is the person who's moving the train. A lot of people think conductors drive the train. Conductors don't drive the trains. They open and close the doors. They make the announcements. They answer questions for us. They keep us safe. Operators are the people or the person at the very front of the train that moves it. In the early 19-teens, mid-19-teens, you start having a lot of labor disputes. Workers are beginning to kind of form unions, things like that. And in 1918, the operator, or at that time they were called motormen, they went on strike. The smart thing to do would have been to shut the system down. If you have your motormen on strike, don't try to move your trains. That's not what they did. They took people that used to be ticket takers, used to be people that worked in stations, gave them a little bit of training, and made them operators. There was one guy by the name, his last name was Luciano. Reports differ saying that he had half a day or a full day's training to be an operator. Either way, very inexperienced. They put him out there in the subway, and he's operating these wooden body train cars like this one. There was a time when briefly on the Franklin Avenue shuttle, it kind of, it's an elevated shuttle pretty much, but it goes underground for a little bit. It goes kind of into a tunnel. There's a turn, like an S-shaped turn, that trains today have to take at 5 miles per hour. This is under Empire Boulevard, what used to be called Malbone Street. And reports, again, are different, saying this guy had the train going anywhere between 30 and 60 miles per hour. Remember, at that point, it's electrified, so they can go a lot faster. The train derails and smashes against subway tunnel wall. A little under 100 people lost their lives. These are not graphic images, so don't worry, but this is the aftermath of this crash. The Malbone Street wreck is the worst subway accident in New York City history. Again, a little under 100 people lost their lives. The bright side of telling you guys about this at the beginning of my tour is to tell you that nothing like this has happened since. The worst subway accident in New York City history happened almost 100 years ago. That is because laws very strong laws were put into place about what types of vehicles are now allowed to go underground and who is allowed to move them. So even though it was a terrible accident, people hopefully did learn some things from it. Okay, yeah?
There were wooden cars just like these that were involved in that accident.
Exactly right. Train cars just like the ones that we're in right now were involved in this. So ever since 1918, it has been completely illegal to have wooden body train cars underground. The real gory details about this is that most people didn't die in the crash. They died from the third rail. So it was a pretty gruesome accident, and that's why we have such strong laws in New York today. Yeah. So you will not find wooden body train cars any longer, long story short. Other materials on this train car that are pretty different from what you experience today are the seats. You guys can, like I said, you can feel the seats. If you're younger, you can bounce for a minute or just for a couple seconds, but don't bounce too hard or too long. There you go. All right, now we're bouncing. Most of the time that I work here, I work with children. Every once in a while, they trust me with adults, and sometimes they trust me with seniors as well. Kids tend to like these seats. They're bouncy, they're cool, they look different. Young adults, I hear them coming in and being like, "Oh, it's so romantic. Why don't trains look like this anymore?" When I work with seniors, they're like, "No, I'm just, these trains. I remember these seats." You would have had seats like these in the subway up until the 1970s, and the vast majority of people that I've talked to who remember riding trains that had these seats do not have fond memories of them. In a museum setting where we have, nice, happy museum people coming, they don't get worn down as bad. When they're in regular passenger service, these seats would fall apart quickly. It's made out of woven rattan, and once rattan breaks, it's very sharp. These were the seats that would pull people's stockings, make runs in your stockings. I've heard stories about one of my coworkers' uncles who got the whole seat of his pants ripped out by a piece of broken rattan. You gotta be careful bouncing on these seats because you might just bounce down on a piece of broken rattan, get a poke in your bottom. You don't want that. You don't want seats in New York tearing your clothes or poking you. It wasn't an issue really in 1904, 1914, but by the end of this train's service in the 1960s, it would have been more of an issue of people coming onto this train car with coffee, with bagels, with food. If you spill anything on these seats, it's going to be very difficult to clean it up. It's very difficult to keep these seats clean. After a while, they start to smell bad. No one wants to sit there. You have to replace them, which means you have to spend money on them. And it's never been cheap to run transportation in New York City, so no one ever wants to spend more money than what they got to. So yeah, that's why you no longer see these seats. They did last for a long time, like I said, up until the 70s in our subway. But the seats we have today, they're not as comfortable, they're not as bouncy, but they're easy to clean and they're difficult to break. So that's why they're important. Another material that you guys, bye guys, another material notice, and again, only people that are tall enough are allowed to do this. All my younger friends, you have to come back when you're taller, okay? But the straps that you see here, these would have been made out, the handholds would have been made out of leather or canvas during this time period. And if you know the term strap hanger, someone who rides the trains all the time, that term originates from when we had leather or canvas straps in our train cars. Always kind of look around at people's shoes. Some of you might have canvas shoes on. It's kind of a cool day for canvas shoes, though. But canvas makes cool shoes. It makes nice bags. It makes cool, you can get a nice canvas for your art. But it doesn't make a very good handhold. All throughout this train car, you can find examples as to why I do not want children hanging from my handholds in this museum. Because they break very easily. That's not where I cut it to prove a point. That's where someone was doing chin-ups and it broke, okay? So just keep in mind that you're young and you're strong, and my train cars are very, very old, so please be gentle with them. As much as I hate to see things break in this museum, though, that's a very accurate representation for what these would have looked like in regular passenger service. These would have fallen apart all the time. Even worse, though, than how quickly they fell apart is how quickly they got disgusting. So we're on a 110-year-old train car. Do you think there's like an air conditioner hidden in here somewhere? No. Can anyone find a fan on this train car?
No.
Nope, no fans at all. The only way to cool this train car off would have been to open the windows. And remember, this is an elevated train car, so you could open the windows and get fresh air. Not like a subway train where you don't necessarily want to open those windows on a subway train car. But keep in mind that public transportation, whether it's the omnibus, the streetcar, the elevated train, or the subway train, public transportation has always been crowded in New York City. Remember, between 1900 and 1910, we had more people living in Lower Manhattan than we have living on the entire island today. Imagine this train car during rush hour. Packed full. If you guys ever been on a rush hour 6 train, imagine that going on right here. Does not matter if the windows are open or not. It's going to get hot in here on a sticky summer day. And on some days, you might reach up and hold on to these straps and find them wet with other people's hand sweat. There are newspaper reports that said they would get so soaked in sweat, they would actually drip it onto the people below. So pretty disgusting, a good reason why we no longer make our handholds out of fabric, right? Very important that the things we have in our stations and on our trains are made out of materials that are strong and easy to clean. Go ahead, my friend.
Yep, this wasn't fancy. It was, so the straps were soaked and it get cold and hot during the winter and summer.
Yeah, it would have been hard to, we're very...
Not by the R30, because that's really comfortable.
Yeah, it's not like that R30. We've got a couple of experts here. I like it. One thing about this train that was considered fancy that maybe us as modern people don't think so are the exposed light bulbs. Like, to me, that looks kind of cheap. Like, what, you can't put, like, a glass ball around it or something? But keep in mind that the early 1900s, electricity is, like, brand new. And this was showing off to be like, look at the light bulbs this train has. If you go to